few different people have told me that I should at least make some kind of video talking about the story of what's going on, how I got here, of these VW buses and what we're doing. So I figured I'd just do a quick video talking about how we got here. So a few years ago, I was living in Sao Paulo, and we built a few different VW buses and shipped them out. And basically what I was doing is like managing the project. So I'd buy the bus and then build the bus using different shops in Sao Paulo. So we had like the upholstery shop, we had the engine shop, we had the engine and so we had the upholstery shop, we had the engine transmission shop, we had the paint shop, and a couple other guys who were involved in the process, and we were basically doing them like that. So this brought about a ton of problems, because what would happen is I would, for example, buy the car and bring it to the paint shop, and I'd put like a 10%, 20% deposit for the guy to start doing the work, and the car would just sit there, and the work wouldn't happen, and I'd have to go there over and over and over again. And man, it was like super frustrating. So eventually each car that we had got painted, but it was a struggle just for that. And then the same thing was happening at the mechanic shop, and the same thing was happening at the upholstery shop. So it was super frustrating. It's like when you pay and just nothing happens. They just keep your money, and you're there waiting for your spot, waiting for it to get in, and your car just never gets in. So we did a lot of like sacrificing the initial deposit and sending the car to another shop. And when that happens twice in a row, man, you start to get real frustrated. So that was the first problem. The second problem was once we got the car in, quality of work. Ooh, like, dude, super frustrating. Second point, quality of work. Like, some of the cars got pretty good. Like I eventually found a shop that did paint that was like reasonable quality. But man, a couple of the cars that we did, like I was so frustrated with the quality of work and like how they turned out. So I stopped. I did a few buses and I stopped because like man, it was too much. So we ended up moving to a different city in Brazil, like that's like 2 hours away from Sao Paulo. And here, the rent for like a business, for a shop space, is way more reasonable. So as soon as we got to the city, I was like, man, let's open up a shop here. Like, let's get our space set up. Let's do this ourselves. Because I want to do the buses, but I want to do them like well done, you know? I want to do them with good quality. Because if I'm going to be the one like sending them to other countries, I want to have a good name. I don't want to be sending some crap and ripping someone off, like, you know? So, which it happens a lot here. Like a lot of the times, a shop down here will build a bus to like a pretty low quality, and then an exporter will put it up for sale, and a guy in another country will buy it through the exporter and get this like lemon, you know, full of Bondo with an engine that's like in terrible shape, with suspension all worn out, like just these disasters that you always hear about coming from Brazil. So what we decided to do is just, so what I started to do in like 2020 is I rented a super cheap, like old warehouse space, like on the other side of the city, like in a rural area, basically hidden like in the back corner. And it had like no security. The shop had just like a lock, and the only good thing is you couldn't see what was inside, and you couldn't like, it was kind of in the middle of nowhere, right? So no one was going where I had all my stuff. So what I started to do is just like put together tools. So I was buying like all kinds of used stuff, and a lot of the times, just like the buses, the tools here when you buy them used are like just done. And the new tools are super expensive. So I did a lot of like buying tools and just like refurbishing them to use them, because I had a limited budget. The sandblasting machine, I bought a used one, and we just like gutted it, we sandblasted it, we hydro tested it, we painted it, we got all of that working again. Stuff like that, just like getting tools off the ground. I built a rotisserie for the buses before I even had a bus really that needed it, because I knew that I was going to use it. So all these little projects I was doing there by myself, like in this hidden shop in like the middle of nowhere in Brazil here. So once I had all my stuff there and I had a couple buses there and I was kind of ready to go, I just used the buses and my truck and everything. We just shucked everything inside and moved to this shop here, which is like, this shop is, I think it's about 5,000 square feet, way bigger. And now we're ready to go. Just getting this shop was a learning experience, right? Because in Brazil, you don't just like rent a place. You have to, it's like a low trust society, I guess you could say. So you have to show all your, what you're gonna do, which in my case wasn't really a big deal. But the problem was I would go to rent a place and or the guy, like, because in Brazil they always ask one price and then you kind of bargain down to another. Getting a shop here was difficult because I would go to look at a place with like a high price and they wouldn't rent it to me unless I paid the full price. And sometimes they even would try to change the price after they realized that I wasn't from Brazil. So stuff like that is kind of annoying. But this place was good because I managed to pretty much negotiate direct with the owner. And he's like super nice guy. He comes to visit sometimes. He's basically like, look, you get this place. He kind of got the vision of what we were doing. He's like, okay, you guys, like, you can get in and the place is yours. Like, he's like, you want to change the floor, you can do it. You want to knock down the wall, you can do it. You want to, just let me know what you're going to do. But as long as you're making the place better, it's good with me. And yeah, this galpão, as they call it, this warehouse does have a lot of parts that we could make better. So we'll be doing a bit of that as well. But anyways, once we got into this shop, then the next thing was to basically find guys to start working, right? So I had a couple guys like who would come and help me out occasionally. Like I had a guy who would help me with moving stuff. I had a guy who would help me with getting the buses going initially. And then I put up an ad to like basically find a metal shaping specialist, which in a town like this city has, I don't know, less than like 1 million people. And finding like a good metal shaper that doesn't already have a job somewhere else, super difficult here because like, man, metal shaping in Brazil is like only just starting to arrive in this country, right? So a guy that responded to one of my ads, he's called Unani, and he basically, him and his dad used to have a shop where they would work on these cars, on these old buses. And so he's done like a ton of combis in the 80s. So he knows like very good how to change a floor, how to do the supports, how to make it like, a reasonable quality job. So getting him in here was like freaking saved the day because I was having such a hard time to find guys who would show up to work, first of all, and guys who would like do a good job. And then, yeah, so I found him. He's like awesome. And then he's like, oh, you got to get Alberto in here. So then he recommended Alberto. So Alberto came in as well. And now it's like us three working on the buses. I got room. I could probably hire more people. But right now, just us three, like we're going good. And I don't want to mess with that just yet. But yeah, that's what we got. So the idea of this shop is to focus on doing like a high quality restoration, right? So the car gets in, we strip it to just the unibody. We put it in the cabin to abrasive blast it, and then we bring it out, we metal work it, we do all the parts, we make the parts that we can't find because in Brazil there's a lot of parts that are for sale for these buses that is like, they're in 20 gauge. They're like these black parts that are in 20 gauge, or even sometimes it's 22 gauge, like 21, 22 gauge, paper thin metal, man. They'll like change the floor of the buses that was made in 18 gauge, and they'll put in like 21 gauge paper thin steel on the floor because it's cheap, right? So you buy one of these that's all restored, and it's got these paper thin panels like all over it. They do door skins, floors, the back trunk area. You can buy all this in this black steel that's like super thin. It's garbage. So, I mean, and that's something that like you can't see from the pictures. From the pictures, when you look at it, you think that you're getting a good bus. But then when you get it, if you put something heavy on the floor, it's gonna dent. Like, that's savage, dude, because they want to save like a couple, you might save like $50 to $60 from the difference in price of these panels, right? It's not a big savings that these guys are making, but it's cheaper, so they use it. So there's like one company in Brazil called Estrigo Aru that makes like proper panels, but they only make a few panels. They don't make all the panels for the bus. They only make a few things. There's lots of other companies that make like these black ones that are trash, and they make all different panels for the bus. So it's frustrating. Now there are guys doing like artisanally made panels, and we got a couple things from those guys. It's pretty cool. They like make it by hand in their shop. And that's something that's taken off a lot in Brazil now. But we're doing the same thing. We're going to be making our own panels, our own side panels, and our own this and that. We're going to be making a bunch of different stuff that you just can't find in the right thickness of steel here, right? So that's it. That's what we're focused on here, is the metal shaping part of it. And even like for this bus, because I've been struggling to find a good paint shop in the city, we ended up just building our own paint booth here really quick, and I got my guys painting this one. They're doing an awesome job because they've already painted a bunch of cars before. However, I don't really want to paint cars here. I would rather just focus on the metalwork, but for this one, we had to paint it because there was just no other way. So we're still looking for a shop to specialize in the paint for us. We found a good upholstery guy who does amazing work. You're going to see once this one's done, the quality of work that he did. And we also have a guy who does the engine, who's super good. We got a great guy for the transmission as well. The transmissions, you have to be really careful because there's a lot of like aftermarket parts that they use here that are made out of a different type of metal than the original Volkswagen, like the gears and oil flingers and other specific parts in the transmission. And so if you put those back in, it's pretty much guaranteed to fail within like 2 years, because it's another thing where like the quality of parts is super low. They do it on a budget, dirt cheap, and it works for a little bit and then it breaks and you gotta get original Volkswagen stuff, right? So we're always trying to do stuff, especially like the motor and transmission, with original Volkswagen parts, right? Like that is essential. Suspension, we got a guy to do the suspension. He does a good job. The suspension is a pretty easy service to do, but he does a nice job, and that's good. And I mean, that's pretty much it. So the only guy that we're looking for still is a paint guy, a good paint guy. I'm sure that we'll find one soon. And that's kind of what we got going on out here. So we're basically doing one bus at a time. We get one bus in, we blast it, we do the metal work, and then we ship it out to get painted. When it comes back from paint and all of our parts are ready to go, we sandblast and paint all the parts, you know, the axles, everything under the bus we do. And you know, of course, we inspect them to make sure that they're in good condition as well, because another thing is that, man, like the pedals, all the linkages under the bus, when, like, these aren't like the North American or European buses where they were only used now and then it was stored or this and that. These buses were workhorses, man. So like everything is shot. Like you look at the pedal, like where the pins go in to hold in the pedal, and it's like just worn out, man. Like just beat, like done. So this kind of stuff is really essential to swap out on these things, right? And you got to take all the parts out, you got to inspect them to see what's good and what's not, and then you got to decide, like, okay, what are we going to buy, what are we going to make? Because another thing is the aftermarket junk, right, that you're going to put it in, it's going to, you know, the client that buys the bus is going to get away with using it for like a year or two, and then he's going to be like, hey, what the hell is this? Like, so that's the thing here, man. It's not just take it apart and buy the stuff and put it back together. You gotta really buy the right stuff from the right brands that's not trash. And like that's why these buses have such a terrible reputation outside Brazil. That's why people are so frustrated when they buy them, when they get ripped off by people who are just trying to make a quick buck, right? So there are a few companies nowadays that do good restorations here in Brazil. I know of two. They have insane wait lines to get your bus done. So since we're just starting out, dude, we're like open. We're like, let's go. Like, who wants a bus? So all we got to do is spread the word, and I'm sure that we'll get a ton of interest. And I mean, I really love doing this. I love two things. I love finding the buses, like going out and, you know, pulling these things out of people's backyards and like down by the river at the back of someone's property. You know, these things are like, they're there, they're hidden, and they've been left for like years. You know, like this one here was 5 years in someone's yard, and before that, like 15 years somewhere else. Where like when this guy bought it, the guy never ended up doing the project. So like, man, there's so much history in these cars. Like you look under the seats, and there's like all kinds of old stuff, and I love digging these things out. And the second part that I enjoy, that I really enjoy, is the process of restoration. Like the process of like, how are we gonna make this part, right? Whether it be like linkage under the bus, whether it be a panel that we have to shape in a certain way, right? I love the process of like developing how are we gonna make this part, and how we're gonna repeatedly make this part in like relatively efficient way, right? Because as soon as we make something that's good, then it's like, man, let's sell this so that the other shops here can start doing their stuff with a better quality, right? Like, let's say, hey, like, look, this linkage that we're making, it is good. Like, it's made properly. It's the right length. It's the right size. It fits in the bus like it's supposed to. Then you're like, hey, look, this is for sale, like, for a reasonable price, you know? So that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to bring the quality in our shop and promote the message of quality in other shops. So anyways, join us, come along for the ride. Super fun, man. Like it's a ton of fun going out and finding the buses, and it's a ton of fun like trying to figure out how to make the parts, right? As well as the fact that we're in Brazil, there's always something interesting going on. So stay tuned, and that's it. We're gonna be finding them, restoring them, and just doing one after the other, and it's gonna be a lot of fun, man. So follow us.